The subject of today's discussion is expanding on the utility guide to private LTE. My name is Matt Chester. I'm the community manager at Energy Central, an online community platform for all players in the utility industry. And we recently collaborated with Interix to put out a special issue newsletter on this topic, the utility guide to private LTE. And today's session is really meant to dive more deeply into some of those topics. So if you're with us today, then you already know how frequently utilities are being asked to deliver on resilience, intelligence, and modernization, all while keeping costs affordable, and basically, and you know how critical the world of private LTE is to accomplish all of these goals. Utilities are dealing with more outside threats than ever before, from extreme weather, even the recent spate of malicious attacks, while the growing amount of distributed generation and assets on the grid are expanding the scope and its requirements. So many of America's leading utilities have already begun implementing private LTE networks, but as this is an area that's still emerging and evolving, staying on top of the latest advancements and technologies can be a full-time job. And to try to make that job a little bit easier, we've pulled in some of the industry's leading experts to discuss all things private LTE, including key applications, critical use cases, market evolution, and the operation of a private LTE network. So what I'll do is I'll give a very brief intro to each of our three panelists. Then when I do that, I'll pass it to you guys to say hello and kickstart our conversation. Maybe you can share your single sentence about why you went into private wireless network as an industry. So first we have Mar Taras, the Vice President of Commercial Operations at Interix. She has over 20 years of experience in the industry, leads the development of the Interix product roadmap. So Mar, welcome to today's session, and why don't you say hello, fill in any gaps of your background that you'd like, and give us that one sentence about why you're in this sector.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. First, I want to start by thanking you, Matt, for hosting this panel and this discussion. I look forward to chatting with such interesting panelists and have a very rich discussion. So, as you said, my name is Mar Taras. I'm the VP of Commercial Operations at Interix. And when I work with an extremely talented team, where we focus on delivering solutions to increase the customer value on the investments of private LTE. Right? We are known, Interix, by providing a spectrum, but we do much more than that, and we will elaborate on that as in this discussion. Professionally, I grew up in the wireless industry. And it's been only in the past 7 years that I've been focusing in the intersection of broadband with utilities. And it's been a very, very interesting ride. Since joining Interix 5 years ago, I'm extremely committed to bringing this transformative tool, transformative broadband to the sector, as it's imperative and crucial. And also, I'm very rewarded to be part of the group of professionals that we have created this momentum of private LTE, and doing things like the creation of ABA. 4 years ago in 2019, a group of pioneers, utilities, and vendors, we got together and launched ABA. This has evolved into being a fully independent organization, a trade organization, non-for-profit, that is a great resource for utilities to learn about private broadband. I serve in the board of directors, and it's a very big honor for me to be part of that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that background, and again for joining us today. So next we have is Callan Kirshner, the Sales Director of U.S. Utilities Southeast for Ericsson. She's responsible for the U.S. energy markets and wireless accounts, focusing on mission-critical private broadband networks. So Callan, thank you also for joining us today. And what else do our viewers today need to know about you, and how did you decide to get involved in this area?
Thank you so much for the intro, Matt, and thank you everybody for joining in and listening and learning on all things private network related. My career has always been in private wireless networks, different technology bases, but I started in 2009, more focused on the P25 LMR side of the wireless business, if you will, and ultimately made the transition over to Ericsson in 2018 with the utilities team as well. So really just started to notice a huge migration and need for massive amounts of data and technology, and the desired use cases that utilities are really hungry for can sometimes be limited in predecessor technologies. And we're noticing that with broadband, whether it be 4G or even in the next generation of 5G, it just opens up an entire world of possibilities and applications that can certainly meet the necessary utility, operational, demands and requirements, as well as the company goals and objectives as technology evolves, essentially. So I've always been in the private wireless space. I'm based out of South Florida, so Fort Lauderdale area, grew up in Ohio, went to school out in Arizona, made my way over to Florida, and just really happy to be here today. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And last but not least, let's welcome David Holinsky, Director at Black & Veatch. Due to some tech difficulties, you won't be able to see him, but you'll be able to hear him. So David has 2 decades of specializing in the development of private networks and automated systems. David, let me kick it over to you. What else do we need to know about you, and why did you get involved in this sector?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And thanks to Energy Central and Anterix for hosting industry insights on this important topic of private LTE. I've enjoyed implementing networks over my career at Black & Veatch, especially first-of-a-kind technology for public carrier networks, and then applying these advanced technologies to private networks. Currently, it's all about the challenges of developing private wireless network solutions to meet the specific use case requirements, such as reliability, resiliency, bandwidth, and latency across multiple market sectors, including utilities, which is my primary focus, but also the industrial, commercial, and government market sectors. So that's kind of a little snapshot of my interest in private LTE.
Wonderful, thanks, David. And I'll keep this this first question to kick off the discussion with you. So for those of us who are on this webinar that might be more new to the emerging category, can you just basically define what a private wireless LTE network actually is?
That's a great question, and I get that question commonly. So it's all about leveraging a public network technology that we commonly use every day, such as our cell phones, and then customizing that network that does not touch, let's say, a public network to meet your specific business application, requirements, operations such as bandwidth demand, reliability, latency, resiliency. For example, utilities, there's a huge bandwidth demand to monitor thousands of points on the electrical grid, and public networks are designed and tuned for a majority of that traffic to be downstream to the user, whereas the utility bandwidth traffic demands are upstream, meaning sending traffic upstream from devices to the devices in the field to substation and control centers to reliability control the grid and support their application. So having a private LTE network means essentially you've got the VIP class of being able to customize your network to support your business operations instead of competing with different customers, let's say on a public network.
If I may something, Matt, to this answer, David, I think you hit on all the key questions. What we found in our conversations with utilities is that we don't have to convince them what private is. Utilities have been using private wireless for the longest time, right? Using narrowband. I think the big focus here, and David has pointed that very well, is we need to educate them on broadband, right? We all use these devices very in a daily basis. We do a lot, right? Now we can leverage that for for this important critical use of critical infrastructure. So I think the challenge is that, right, how we apply this technology that has been around for 20 years to help modernize the electric grid.
Excellent. That's helpful. And I think once you understand the what, the natural next question is the why. And I mentioned in the introduction the myriad of goals utilities have in terms of resilience and intelligence and security. So I'd love to talk about what are some of the desired outcomes of utilities when they deploy these next generation networks into their grid operations. And maybe Callan, that you can start with this one.
Sure, absolutely. So, compared, I guess, in today's world compared to a decade ago, the technology is changing so much faster than we ever anticipated. And so with that comes the need for more information at a faster response time. So from a utilities perspective, implementing a broadband or a private network that has broadband LTE 5G capabilities is going to allow for, faster information to become available. You're going to therefore have quicker response times. The lights are always going to stay on. You're going to know what's happening on your devices. They're going to be monitored more efficiently. That's therefore going to, increase the safety and security of the network as well as the personnel. So, but all of this can be done and applied in one uniform network. So one of the major benefits of a private LTE is, or broadband in general, is everything can be managed on that singular network. Multiple applications, multiple software types. It's all combined together in one uniform brain, or the core, as we like to call it, and managed in that particular manner. So we're seeing and we're hearing a lot of buzzwords of grid modernization, and with that, from a utility perspective, it's demanding quicker response times. We're hearing a lot about AMI, so net metering, and having those types of technologies implemented. The device counts, as David had mentioned as well, monitoring multiple devices, not just the mobility, but the data side. So IoT, SCADA applications. Another area that we're also seeing a lot of traction and a lot of discussion on is also sustainability. So within utilities. So we're obviously in a world where we are being tasked and having objectives of reducing our carbon footprint, to go more green and protect our environment. So having the ability to have a 5G or a 4G, whatever type network, you're able to do things in real time using AI or drones, and all of that is going to eliminate the use of gas emissions. You don't have to deploy, trucks in order to monitor or see what's going on with the site tower or anything of that matter. So all of these elements kind of come together, and when applied properly within a private network, you can start having those goals and objectives met years down the line within the utility space.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm hoping maybe we can bring it from the theoretical to the tangible and the use cases that you all have seen, and in particular that the aha moments that sometimes the utility might have in their journey towards the decision for private wireless networks and building that into their grid modernization plan. So Mar, maybe I can start with you. Can you share maybe a story or two of watching that journey happen and that realization from the utility perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I will bring what Callan has said on the theoretical to the practical. We've seen, there are many use cases, right? Whether it's, first and foremost, right, decarbonization, the goal of 2050, a carbon neutral economy. This is putting a ton of pressure onto that, onto utilities, and this is a government mandate, right? Our president has put a lot of emphasis into that. Whether is that, right, security, another one, cybersecurity, it's primary, resiliency due to weather events, right? Electrification of transportation, millions of EVs now had to be connected to the grid, right? Callan has mentioned that, right? The real-time visibility of the network, right? With all the DER integrations at a consumer level, as well as as a distributed level, you need to have good visibility into the demand for the load, and also the demand, the supply of that load and where it goes, right? AI is going to be in that. So, from an aha moment perspective, what we have seen is, recently, this past week at Distributech, right, we have one of the executive technology of one of our customers come to our booth, and he looked around and was shocked to the amount of use cases at display at our booth. right? We were partnering with our Antagonist Active ecosystem members, and he said, wow, I either need to bring my team to you, or you guys need to come to our offices and show all of these use cases that are already integrated into private LTE. He said he mentioned he didn't know that that was the case. So that's I think that is extremely powerful, because I think one of the things that is unique with this industry momentum that folks in this panel have done and created is, that the tremendous amount of collaboration in organizations like ABA or the Antagonist Active ecosystem, right, to help utilities get fast to the outcomes. This is not about just putting a network, right? It's also about, putting all these use cases and getting the benefits out of these use cases. Another aha moment that I had, and we'll stop with that, right? I come from the telecom industry, right? And the network for the carriers stop at the site, at that antenna, right? We took out the antenna and everything back, right? Talking to the utilities are like, no. Our wireless network ends at the device and ends at the application, right? So I think from folks like me that come from the traditional, consumer focus, is like, we should be looking end to end. We should be looking outcomes, and this is why it's so important, the collaboration, from the smart grid vendors down to the chipset manufacturers.
Absolutely. Callan, does that resonate with your experience as well?
Yes, it absolutely does. And there was a particular aha moment that happened with one of our customers early on in kind of the discovery phase of, they were looking into, should we go down the private LTE path? Let's kind of learn the ins and outs. And one of the things that, and I had mentioned in the prior question, was everything can be managed in one uniform network. So what we were seeing with this particular customer is they had multiple software applications that were all being individually managed versus on one uniform network. So we went through, the ins and outs of a private network, and we kind of said, hey, look, you guys realize we can implement and integrate all of this onto one network, so it's one platform to manage. And they kind of stared and, really? We don't need to have 5 different, people doing all that. No, it can all be consolidated onto one platform. So from an efficiency standpoint, that was oh my goodness, this is great. So we've got, different subject matter experts in these areas that we can now refocus them in other areas. We've got the right folks to manage and operate the network, whether it be, an OEM like Ericsson or the utility itself. But just having everything consolidated onto one network helps simplify things so that they're not having to respond to different particular parts of what they call their system, but they're not all tied together and they don't all talk to each other. And that's critical in a mission critical environment, which utilities are in. So everything is critical in terms of what happens to, whether it be the device count, the cap bank, the personnel itself, ensuring that everything is monitored and responded to accordingly and monitored on one uniform network was a real eye opener for them, and in a positive way.
Absolutely. And you bring up the utilities as mission critical, which of course they are, and they're also can be very large and a lot of times, and that leads to them being a little bit slower to move or getting a little bit of, the paralysis of analysis when there's too many options and in a way that's different from other industries. So when you're looking at the utilities or maybe talking to clients, how do you position these private wireless networks as being different in a way that's beneficial for them compared with the current state of public internet or the status quo of doing nothing? How is this adding to their grid modernization plans, and how do you communicate that to them?
Correct. Oh, we could spend a whole webinar just talking about this piece. So we unfortunately can't always rely on the public carriers. So a lot of these types of networks, they're nationwide. They're designed to satisfy the consumers, the yous and me's, who are using our smartphones day in and day out. And the coverage is not always there. It may or may not be. If a site goes down for that particular carrier, they might be days, weeks, months, years to respond to fix it. A utility cannot wait for that. So if a site goes down, that's part of their service territory that's no longer being monitored. That's mission critical being compromised. That's safety and security of the network as well as the personnel. So this is why it's critical that a private network is implemented for utilities, because at the end of the day, a public carrier is not a mission critical grade network. It's not designed for mission critical customers. And we are, of course, going down the FirstNet route. That is something that is being designed for mission critical first responders. It's not the right fit that I would consider for the utilities market. These guys need their own network to own and operate, to harden, to secure, to make sure, as we talked, about the importance of safety and security, making sure it's hardened so no hacking can take place. All of those categories, pieces of the private network puzzle for utilities have to fall in line in order for them to operate efficiently, in order for them to meet their, company goals and objectives. And now the flip side of that is not doing anything. So let's say it's status quo as is with whatever network they're using today, for whether it be for their data or their mobility or both. Technology is going to continue to evolve and continue to change, and those applications are going to continue to grow and be available for private broadband networks. And if those networks on the utility space don't evolve together, there's limitations. There's limitations on mobility. There's limitations on data. Latency can potentially increase because there's just not as much of a pipeline in order to push the amount of data that's truly required to monitor a network properly. So we're seeing, again, by making that transition to private broadband networks, it just opens up an entire world of possibilities where the application capability will, whether it be a significant reduction in latency, hardening of the network to prevent, hackers from coming in, only providing access controls to certain personnel, those types of use cases, mobility, massive IoT, SCADA, monitoring the devices on the network, all of those are handled very custom and unique to a utility and not to a public carrier network. Long story short.
And Mara, I'm sure you could add to that story more.
Yes, what I would say is, and Callum, thank you for your answer. It was very comprehensive, and there is very little that I can add. But from my perspective, I would say that the biggest risk is do nothing. Right? All the use cases that we've talked about, all those point to broadband. Right? And whether it's going to be fiber, where fiber can get there. But the footprint of the utilities to the service territories is humongous. So, a cost-effective way is wireless, right? So that is where the demand comes. What I would also say is that, private versus not private, right? Callum has already explained it at large. The only thing I would add is, private means control, and Callum has said all the things that utilities want to control, from the resiliency, the hardening, the access, right, the security. So, again, right, as I mentioned in my introduction, I don't think we need to convince them on the private side, because they are used to that. They have their own fiber network that is private, their own narrowband. It's about, broadband and all the use cases that they need to put to manage them in an efficient way. As Callum has mentioned, all those needs to be under one platform that allows them to manage them very efficiently and give them the capabilities that they need: low latency, prioritization of traffic, etc., etc.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And in the lead up to that last question, I mentioned, the difficult position utilities are sometimes in being so large and being so mission critical. And another area that makes them unique is because they're so beholden to their customers and especially regulated in a way that they must serve their customers in an affordable and fair way. So given that position where they're ultimately serving their communities, I'd love to hear from both of you if you could talk about how investing in these new technologies, these new opportunities, what does the consumer see differently? How does it make their life better? How does it impact their service? Or is it kind of just operating in the background and they're kind of none the wiser if it means fewer outages? Great, but they don't see the difference. What's that sort of look like?
I can start, right? And I've been, I'm very focused now on working on this government opportunity, the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, and there is this ongoing process of the applications for grants. One is a smart grid. And you can see in there that the focus of the government, right, is of all these investments in new infrastructure has to have a very, very, very clear community benefit. If, right, they are not going to invest in anything that you cannot see that has a direct impact into that. And the government has recognized that communications, it's part of that infrastructure that is needed to improve the benefits of the consumer, right? So, while there may not see a direct impact, I would say the first thing in some of the areas of this country, right, the West Coast, we can minimize risk of wildfires. There's a direct impact to consumers, and we see companies like SDG&E really investing in these kind of use cases using private LTE. Things around grid modernization that we see, Emirates and the likes, right, also using private LTE to enable greater resiliency, right, improving all the KPIs relative to safety and safety, right. So the direct impact to the consumer, it's clear based on the use cases that they want to put in the network, that it's all about increasing the quality and uptime of those consumers, having electricity and being more clean, right? Being in clean energy delivered at affordable prices, right? One of the important things at the ABA Summit, we had the COO of SCE presenting that, and she said one of the tasks that I would give you guys that are doing a very important piece of work on pushing private LTE for utilities is how this help us make the connection of how private LTE impacts the consumer bill, right? So this is an open question. I think there are very clear examples, on some of the use cases that already been put in place, but we need to make a lot of effort of integrating more use cases that then will have the benefit reflected in the consumer's bill. I don't know,
same question over to you, Callan.
And just to kind of echo everything that Mar had mentioned as well. So, I mean, from a consumer perspective, I mean, we need our lights on. That's, at the end of the day, that is what matters to the Callan Kirschners of the world, if you will. Being able to have power, we can have our internet, we can continue business operations in whatever industry you are in. Critical infrastructure stays intact, lives are protected if we're talking, hospitals or anything medical related. So all of that comes full circle, and having a private broadband network can help mitigate any of those issues that would take place, whether it be an outage because of, let's say, there's more proactive approaches taking place. We're able to deploy, drones to take a look at the grid, take a look at the network versus having to send out trucks. So you're reducing your carbon emissions, as well as you're able to, quickly and efficiently, and in most cases in real time, see what's going on with a particular tower or with a device so that you can react accordingly, whether it be correct it or fix it so that an outage doesn't occur. Same thing can happen with personnel being dispatched with a private broadband network. You can video the problem or the issue, and maybe someone's on the back end instructing you how to correct it as well, again, to prevent an outage from taking place. So there's a plethora of use cases that broadband technology will allow utilities to have to prevent the outages from happening, therefore always keeping the lights on.
Absolutely. I mean, keeping the lights on. You said it perfectly right. That's what it always comes down to, and that's the utility's job. And we're getting all these new exciting tools that's enabling it more. And specifically, if we, again, go back to private LTE. That LTE stands for long-term evolution. So, what are the utilities doing to reap the benefits of these next generation networks, both now in terms of the private LTE, and then where's that going to go in the future when it comes to private 5G or whatever might come after that? Let me kick that to Callan first.
Sure. No, that's fine. I'm kind of thinking through. So I mean, some of the benefits of what Mara, David, and I, what we've kind of been talking through a little bit, whether it be, okay. Is my audio back? I apologize. It kind of buffering out for a second. So whether it be, I think the first and foremost that everybody cares about or talks about is latency. Obviously going from maybe a narrowband technology to a broadband, whether it be LTE or 5G, you're going to notice a tremendous amount of speed in applications going from one to the next. Of course, adding in the hardening and the security aspects of it, the resiliency, the redundancy that can come into place. We see a lot with utilities. They want to make sure their network is, first of all, it's theirs, it's private, it is controlled, it is accessible to the persons that are deemed to be accessible. But also it's redundant in so many ways, whether it be geographically based. You've got multiple pieces of infrastructure that if something were to happen, another aspect picks up the traffic, picks up the capacity, and continues operations as usual without anybody noticing. So all of those elements kind of come into what are the benefits that a utility can see while opening that data pipeline to allow for more use cases, more applications, all taking place on one uniform network. So everything from mobility to massive IoT, DER, DA, all of these types of applications can all be managed on that network versus something that maybe has a smaller data pipeline where you might be able to get some of that capability, but not the full view that you would like to normally see. And all of those adding up will help improve, overall operations, reduce response times, or increase response times, I apologize, to ensure that, the utility, the grid, the lights, everything operates efficiently.
That's great.
Absolutely.
I would have to add, a couple of comments, thank you, Calvin. What I would say is, which I think is an important topic, right? These private LTE are based on the standard that the wireless industry uses, right? It's 3GPP based, right? It starts with 4G with evolution to 5G. And I think this is an important point because now utilities do not risk to make investments on technologies that traditionally could have, have gotten stranded, right? There is, a path, it's a utility, it's a technology for a specific application. That application, run out of maxes the lifespan, right? And then, the network also does the same. So by investing in this, standard technology, it's future-proof, the roadmap is secured. When you do it on your own, now you also control the recycling of, and the renewal of that technology, right? One of the concerns that we've heard from utilities is that when they had put things in commercial operations, while their assets have a lifespan of 10, 15, 20 years, right? And they have been connected to 2G, 3G, right? Now they need to go and touch those devices because the commercial operator was sunsetting those networks, right? So now they control the refresh cycle of that technology, while, right, having, that roadmap that they can go, whenever they need. Also, and then the last point, being on the standard platform that is the same as the public networks, right? That adds a benefit, right? There is a lot of talks on these utilities that are deploying private LTE to want to have increased resiliency. So the ability for these devices to fail over go back and forth, with the public network, right? So, this is something that we've heard, and Terex, has launched a product. It's called Catalyst. We have demonstrated that at DistribuTech. It has had, very good acceptance, because, while private LTE are going to be more resilient, etc., there is always one moment when, you have to bring that site down because you have to do repairs, you have to do upgrades, right? You don't want those devices to be stranded, even if it's for hours, right? So this ability to also leverage the commercial infrastructure, it's an important point, and it's in line with these investments on the 3GPP technology.
Absolutely, it's a lot of exciting stuff to take in, and that's why I think it's interesting and maybe important. Now we can talk about the role you all play. How the companies like the Black & Veatches, Ericssons, and Necessitates, how do those companies really play a role in helping utilities towards these outcomes when the shared goals of that energy security, resiliency, clean energy, etc. What are you all able to do to enable that, and what's the role your companies play?
So I think I'll take a stab at this one first. So all three elements play an extremely critical role, and I'll use a house analogy just to kind of simplify things. So if you're trying to build a house, you need to find how do you want to build it? How do you want it to look? Where do you want it to be? What type of land do you want it to be on? How do you want to furnish it? So someone like a Black & Veatch who can provide you an unbiased view of the technology, of the market, what's available, understand the use cases, understand the utility objectives as well, is a very positive implementation or integration into a utility when constructing or going down the private broadband path. Now, of course, from an Ericsson perspective, we can of course associate with that and assist in those areas, but we're likely going to be biased. We're going to be pushing Ericsson type technology, but we also need to talk about where's the property, where's the land, because we can't do anything without spectrum, and that I know is a pivotal discussion that a lot of utilities are having. Is we love the idea of a private network, but we don't know where to start. How do we know what spectrum works for us? How do we know what the capacity needs are? How do we even know what our use cases are? So having an Anterix as part of that conversation as well can help provide what type of property type are you going to be building your house on, which could be provided by Ericsson, and how do you construct it, furnish it to the exact liking, which a Black & Veatch can kind of provide as well. So I always use a house analogy. It just seems to always resonate with folks. So all three is it's a pivotal triangle that all three have to kind of work together in order to provide that holistic view for a utility, and every utility is different. There is no one size fits all. You cannot forklift a private network that is from utility A and apply it to utility B. We have to make modifications, tweaks, because we understand the ways of working, the operations, the use cases of which are done, the company goals and objectives all vary and are all different. So a Black & Veatch, an Ericsson, and Anterix, we can all provide that custom input together to meet each utility's needs.
And what I would add, right, this is being reflected, right, in organizations like ABBA or the Anterix Active Ecosystem, right? So while we might have been known because we are the spectrum shop, right, we are much more than the spectrum shop, right? For us, you cannot successfully bring spectrum to the market if you don't develop the entire ecosystem around that, right? So, and I think that has been reflected on, the success of this initiative that now we have more than 100 members in our ecosystem, right? And creating that collaboration and momentum, right? And bringing, some of the discussions between the different technology members, right? So creating that dynamic so utilities do not have to go to many places where to get an end-to-end solution, right? So one of the things is that we hear constantly is that utilities don't want to be in the telecom business, right? A commercial wireless carrier, it's what they do. So they have the time and the focus and the skills to go, and meet with everybody, best of breed, and they develop their architectures, and they do like that. We have to be much more expedient and respond to the urgency of utilities deploying broadband by creating end-to-end solutions for them. And this is why, we are extremely, happy and pleased, and it's an honor to be working with, partners like Ericsson and Black and Beach, right, and many others, right, that are part of this, 100 titles club of folks that we have the mission of helping accelerate the deployment of broadband for utilities, but not only that, making them successful in meeting their business goals and getting the outcomes that they want to get at. And then, have to be a little bit selfish here, right? We believe, right, that 900 is the best option in the market. But what it's clear is that private broadband is here to stay, and we better, make sure that we all work together to help utilities, use this tool to meet their goals.
And one more thing I'd like to add, Matt, just to kind of, because I'm sure a lot of folks that are listening in on this, they're either in the pioneer stage, early adopter of, we know we want to go down this path, we've already done it, or we're close to, or there are those that are this is brand new to them. So how do I start? I like what I'm hearing, but where do I go? How do I do this? So, I would at least like to offer up, you've got three major players within the utility space, within private broadbands. You've got your Spectrum point of contact, you've got an OEM, through Ericsson, myself, and then you've got Black and Beach as well. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if to help get that conversation started. And, from an Ericsson point of view, we early last year have, deployed and created a utility innovation center. It was designed by utilities for utilities, and it is a, playground show and tell of devices, use cases, operating on live networks, Anterix Spectrum included, Band-Aid, there's other options as well. But if you're not sure, what use case do we need? Or we think we want to do this, we're just not sure how it's going to play out. Ericsson, can we test it out in your lab and see what the effects are? We're happy to do that. Or, we would invite anybody to just come and look around. We're happy to provide a tour. But it was designed for utilities to either test out specific use cases, test out devices that are maybe new and not quite sure we want to put it on the network yet. We want to make sure it's tried and true. So again, if you're in that early stage and you want to learn a little bit more and you want to see things happen in real time in a live environment, we've got that lab available. And I would extend that invite to everybody on this call if you would like to attend or have a tour. It's in our Plano office in Texas. So I wanted to at least leave that piece for everybody to think about.
Yeah, that's a great offer. I hope you get taken up on that. And also, it brings up to mind something Maria said earlier, which was when you were at Distributech last week, the people coming through the booth who just were kind of wowed at all the use cases, and that kind of got me wondering, what have you noticed changing about maybe the questions that utilities are asking you or the requests they have for you as this is becoming more need to have and more top of mind? Are those conversations evolving from what they used to be?
Absolutely, right. What we've seen is an evolution of what's the spectrum that I need to use, to can I connect that use case, and can you help educate my smaller grid vendor into evolving their product roadmap into to be able to have comms with private LTE. So, again, I'm going to go back because I think last week was a seminal moment for the industry and this micro sector that we are creating of utility private LTE, right? Distributech. This is here to stay. Last year, this edition of Distributech is the first time that they have a track on private broadband. Before that, for the distribution and transmission guys, communications was an afterthought. But communications and private broadband. It's front and center. It's a strategic tool for them. They are learning that, right? And the industry is clear that is recognizing that need. So you see the conversation evolving from the IT house around how do I put a tool, right, into how do I use this tool to get my utility outcomes that I want, the results that I want to run my own business, right? So when you have folks that like, how can I use this tool to do wildfire mitigations, run the energizing a line before it touches the ground, right? You have 1.4 seconds. We need super low latency type of applications that only in a communications with under your control you are able to shape the traffic in that way. So this is what we are saying, right? Early on, right? We saw a lot of the things about what is an LTE network, what spectrum, what do I need to do. Now it's more into help me develop that ecosystem of devices and applications that can run onto those networks.
Yeah, that's a fascinating evolution. And so, I'm curious again for both of you, do you have specific words of advice on how to best expand the private wireless network solutions for the utility clients, specifically into their grid modernization plans? What's the key advice that you would give? And Cal, let's go to you first. Oh, David, you're on.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, I've been on, and this has been great conversation and so forth, listening to it and so forth. So I just wanted to let you know that I was still on, and maybe that I would add to Mars and Callan's comments that utilities don't want to get into the telecommunications business and so forth, but with grid modernization, the utility private network is commonly being phrased as the third grid. I mean, first is transmission, second is distribution, and the third is now the private network. And utilities, are requiring to own their own transmission and distribution infrastructure for power delivery. And it just makes sense that they own their own private network to control reliable operations of the grid. And like Callan was talking about, investing in private LTE technologies, will support existing and future use cases, is a tremendous economical advantage from a reliability perspective and security. And I really want to hone in on security. And this enables utilities to invest in one technology, as Callan had said, to implement, operate, and maintain, from a reliability security perspective, rather than having 5 to 10 separate networks supporting numerous use cases. And all with a separate operations, maintenance, and security requirements. It's just not sustainable. So, a common phrase that we use is build it once, use it many. For example, a private LTE network, can support all use cases. And rather than using separate networks to support their LMR, DMR, or voice communications, their MAS, that supports SCADA and wireless point-to-point, to support new special bandwidth requirements, you've got a private LTE network that you build it once, just make it reliable, and it can support long-term operations, and it can be significantly less cost than supporting 5 to 10 different networks. And from the cybersecurity perspective, one of the most beneficial aspects of LTE is the continuous advancements in cybersecurity. LTE is based on third generation partnership. That's what we call 3GPP, and has multiple security features such as encryption, and it enables the traffic to be isolated end to end, leveraging newer MPLS backhaul technologies. So one of the huge concerns is all about cybersecurity, and LTE enables significant improvements in that area just alone.
Absolutely, well said. And any follow-up from Mar and Callan on that?
I would say first, sorry, David, that we didn't know you were here.
Kind of feel like Fox News, the odd man out.
I could not have phrased it better. So that was a perfect response, David.
No, absolutely. I think you did very well on honing in onto the cybersecurity aspects of private LTE. I don't think there is much more to add here, but that's one of the primary use cases that we also see utilities focusing on.
And I love that. I love the phrase, build it once, use it many. That's might plagiarize that one.
Absolutely.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and probably, we're, like a Black & Veatch, Anterix, Ericsson solution is, one thing that was probably one of the biggest challenges, a fully integrated implementation solution. That means end-to-end, taking into account the end-to-end performance and warranty requirements will be important, especially as you start the operating and maintaining the network. Building it, getting the funds and the business case and implementing it. But as you start operating and maintaining the network, it's going to be really important to make sure you have a bow tie wrapped around the performance and warranty aspects of the network. And this includes the make-ready infrastructure, site modifications, power requirements, the LTE technology, the core, the RAN, the CPE, the backhaul network, the physical and logical requirements. Having separate parties, third parties, or whether you're self-performing, installing segments of the network infrastructure, commonly lead to gaps around warranty and performance guarantees. And the utility will need to be, prepared to address the end-to-end performance gaps as they arise. So that's one other thing that it's really key to hone in on is having a good execution implementation plan, but also an operations and maintenance plan.
And David, you brought, and I'm really glad you brought the operations and maintenance piece up, because it is always a critical discussion with utilities, because we know you guys are heavy on CapEx, love CapEx, hate O&M, and rightfully so. So taking a look at your current state today and understanding what are those O&M costs, in working with, whether it be an Ericsson or a Black & Veatch, to understand how can we consolidate or how can we reduce that O&M with a private broadband network, or perhaps in some cases eliminate it entirely so that it can be tied into CapEx dollars when you're deploying that private network. And that's something that we've seen with many of our customers, the Amerants, the Evergys, the Southern Links, where we will work with each customer, each utility to try and modify or ensure that some of those maintenance and warranty costs can get tied into and utilized for CapEx dollars, that therefore reducing and or almost eliminating O&M year over year to maintain the network. So thanks for bringing that up, David.
Yeah, no, I just would add another comment, right? I always think about these networks like a little plan, right? Somebody brings you the plan, it's like building the network, but you have to maintain that network. You have to, water it, you have to nourish it, right? And one of the challenges and I think opportunities of private LTE with utilities is that we can use knobs and dials, right? In a way that commercial carriers have never used that, right? All the data in carriers, the majority of the data is best effort, right? Now, we have a very powerful tool in our hands, right? With all the, prioritization efforts, QoS type of things, where, utilities can do more with the same tool by using the feature functionalities that exist in the technology and that in a commercial setting have been barely used or scratch the surface on the potential of all of that. And that is going to require a lot of expertise, right? And I think a lot of collaboration with, the people that understand the network very well, the technology, and the folks that have the use cases, right? I see a future where, places like ABA, they provide templates on how to prioritize the different use cases and configure these networks, right? To give a head start to utilities that are new into that. So we have the pioneers that are going to be, the guinea pigs on how to put all of that in place. And I think, Callan, you guys might be working on all of that, all the network optimization. But I think it's, looking off what you do after the network is set up, it's as important as getting the network up and running.
Definitely. So this conversation has been a terrific one. I have no doubt our viewers have learned a lot. I know I have. I'm sure we could go on easily for another hour, but we have just a couple minutes left. So I want to allow each of our panelists to share their closing thoughts. So the question I'll pose to each of you is this: if nothing else, what do you hope those who joined us today, what do you want them to take away from this conversation? And David, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I would say take the time to develop a thorough plan, including operations, just like we were talking about. Because, a network, even though it might have the best technology, unless you have, a thorough operations and maintenance plan from to address your performance guarantees and SLAs to your customers, it's all for naught. So choosing the technology to support your, existing, future, and use cases is just one of the requirements. Having a detailed execution plan that accounts for the regulatory permitting of the building, new towers, having the experience installing communication devices on your own infrastructure, such as whether it's the distribution poles or the transmission towers, requires a lot of coordination across your utility business lines to ensure the equipment is installed per your standards without impacting the ability to safely maintain the electrical distribution infrastructure. So leveraging that infrastructure is great, but then also you just need to make sure that it's installed correctly so that it doesn't impact the safety of maintenance. So not only having a thorough plan, can significantly impact the implementation, but it also can impact your overall operational cost.
And I would just kind of piggyback off of what David mentioned. So, understand from, each individual person's perspective, within your own utility, what are the pain points or challenges, or what's working, what's operating efficiently, and kind of take a look at how that holistically impacts your day-to-day operations. Understanding your current financial model, whether it be the maintenance of the network, as David had mentioned, but kind of do a little bit of homework ahead of time to see and kind of put together those pros and cons and see how that can be applied and how private broadband can potentially fill those gaps. And we know for the most part it will, but understand the financial benefits of, is it worth it? Is it going to move the needle enough? And that is something where once you've got those pieces of the puzzle together, you can reach out to a Black & Veatch or an Ericsson or an Anterix to say, here's kind of what I've got. What do you guys think? Where are we in this? Are we, is this the right fit? Is this not the right fit for us? And kind of help guide you through that process.
And the only thing that I would add is, broadband is here to stay, right? And it's not coming; it's already here, and it's not just me, saying that, or Anterix saying that. You have, Wendell Reimer from Excel, right? If you go to our LinkedIn, you scroll down a little bit, you'll see one of the videos of his testimonial about, what he chose Private LTE. And one of the things that, building on what Callan has said, there are plenty of resources for utilities to go to, they can reach out to the vendors, but I also would encourage them to go to their peer utilities, right? To learn from their experience, right? Utilities like, Emeren or SDG&E and upcoming Excel, they had been hosting the ABA Summit and PlugFest, right? They are already way into their journey of Private LTE, and we know they will be more than happy to share their experiences, right? So this is unbiased feedback from their peers that can accelerate their learning. And then only join. There are a lot of resources, ABA, the Anterix Active Ecosystem, the utilities themselves, right? It's there is a lot of momentum for them to get help on getting up to speed.
Excellent. Well, thank you to the three of you for your closing thoughts there, and for the great insights shared during today's session. And thank you also to all of those who were able to join us today. Like I said, I think this was really productive and educational. So I really appreciate your participation. And I think with that, that'll conclude today's session. So thank you all for joining.